Good morning, friends of QuestBite. It is that time again. We're going to go ahead and get things started here and have some fun for today. It's me again. I'm your host, Brandon. Today I've got a special guest with me who I'll introduce here in just a couple of moments. But before we do that, we're going to go ahead and play your guys' favorite game. We're going to mix it up a little bit different here today. So you're going to have multiple of the Quest logo quapples to find. Let's go ahead and play that favorite game of your guys's, Spot the Quapple. Give you a quick preview here for just a moment. You can start looking around, and we're going to put 30 seconds on the clock. You guys can go ahead and get started. Find the quapples in the Eastern Inferno. That kind of gives you a little bit of a clue for where we're going in today's Quest Bite. Got 30 seconds there. Time is running out. Spot as many of those logos as you can find. Look for the little apple with the Q on it. 10 seconds left. We got 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, did you find them all? I'm going to give you the answer here. We got 5 of them today, so hopefully you had some fun with that, had a little bit of a challenge there. One of my favorite things there. So as I told you guys on another Quest Bite, I went to school for mechanical engineering at Eastern Washington University, right here around Spokane, just over in Cheney, so hopefully you guys are familiar with it. But the clue that I gave you guys there, we're going to do a quick interview with one of my mentors when I went to engineering school at Eastern. He was one of my professors. I learned a ton of stuff from the guy. And the thing that really stuck out in my mind when I was taking classes with my professor that we're going to talk to, he had a ton of experience to share that was not just education related specifically to what we were talking about. He had all kinds of experience in engineering before he got into education, even being a pilot. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of that. Those are the things that I remember and I thought you guys would find interesting as well. Hear it from another engineer, why he got into it in the first place. So we're going to welcome to the show here Mr. Jason Durfee, professor at Eastern Washington University in mechanical engineering. Jason, how are you today?
I'm good.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us on the show. We appreciate you making some time to hop on with us here.
Thanks for the invitation.
Absolutely. So like I was saying, I always enjoyed kind of hearing about some of your experiences when we were learning these engineering principles, and a lot of it was really relatable. I'd like to just kind of start with what was your background and what did you do before engineering? I know there was a lot of experience that you can share from, so tell us a little bit about it.
So I went to school for engineering and I got a bachelor's and a master's degree in engineering. And then right after that, I actually went into the Air Force and flew jets in the Air Force. I did that I was in the Air Force for 11 and a half years and then decided to get out and try flying with the airlines. After I'd gotten hired with the airlines, we had the attacks of 9/11 and the airlines started losing money and they ended up laying me off from the airlines. And so I decided to then I needed a job and found a teaching job at Eastern. I had taught before while I was in the Air Force. I was able to spend some time teaching at West Point, actually. And so I'd enjoyed that. I thought, well, let me get back into education and teaching engineering.
Excellent. That's very nice. Teaching at West Point, I'm sure flying jets was a pretty awesome experience for you. I'm sure a lot of the kids and adults in the audience would like to hear more about that too, flying some of those jets. What kind of jets did you actually fly?
So I flew the KC-135. It's an air refueling tanker. It's the kind that they have out at Fairchild here, just outside of Spokane. And in fact, that's what brought me here to Spokane when I got reassigned out to Fairchild. So we would go up and in midair, we would transfer fuel to any of the other military aircraft that needed gas. When I was at West Point, part of the reason I was there, I was an Air Force officer, but I was teaching at the Army Academy because they needed a few Air Force pilots because we also flew little Cessna aircraft. and we would put the students in there, and it would be a flying laboratory for the aeronautical engineering students. So that
Very
was a lot of
nice.
fun.
Those were some of my favorite things to do in school too, is the laboratories, always the hands-on experience, and that was always fun for me with, especially in the engineering field. We'll talk more about that here in a second, but you've done a lot of things related to technology and engineering, things that really gained that experience for you. What would you say if you had to pick one? What was one of your favorite jobs that you had?
Oh yeah, there's good and there's bad about everything. There's a lot of fun involved in everything, and I think that's maybe part of my personality is I can find sort of the fun part of a job and just to be able to enjoy that. Flying jets was a lot of fun, but airplanes take you places, and so at the end of the day, you'd park your plane and you'd be somewhere else, and you can't go home. You'd be spending the night in a hotel or something like that, and so you know just kind of to bring out the fact that there's you can always find something fun to do, and everything also has a little bit of work to it. I guess that's the way they call it, work.
Absolutely. With the work that you've done, can you tell us, was there anything like super interesting that you got to work on when you were doing engineering? Anything that you can share experience on?
When I was at West Point, besides teaching, a lot of times the Department of Defense would use the engineering group there as a consulting group when they would have some ideas, and a lot of that stuff was proprietary. We couldn't really talk about it, but they did bring us this project that a company was proposing to build this big offshore platform, and they wanted to land cargo planes on there. And so we got to do the analysis of how deep the draft and the power to drive the thing around, and what it would be like for the pilot to land on this floating platform out in the middle of the ocean. So that was
Very
pretty
cool.
interesting.
Oh yeah, that would be interesting. Absolutely. All kinds of fun stuff to work on, and I know you and I have talked about it before, but just the hands-on application and solving a problem is really the fun part about that. So yeah, that's always awesome to hear about. If you had to think back on it, I know that I've talked about this on Quest Bite before, but what do you think ultimately led you into engineering in the first place?
Yeah, so probably like a lot of you going through high school, I wasn't involved in a lot of different things, and you could do that in high school, and then you get to college, and they say, okay, you got to pick one thing, and that's your career, and that was kind of hard. I'd been involved in music and like literature and creative writing and science, and what kind of helped me work my way into engineering was realizing that engineering, like you mentioned, first of all, is problem solving,
Hmm.
fun to solve problems, and it's applied science. And so engineers learn about science, about the physical world, but then they have to use that knowledge and that information and apply it to say, okay, I've learned about the behavior of materials, but how can I use that knowledge to make stronger bridges or safer vehicles? And I've learned about combustion. Well, how can I make more efficient engines? And so you apply that knowledge to actually solve problems in specific situations.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Just having that understanding of how things work and then actually using that knowledge to make the world better. It sounds like you and I are on the same page. That's the most fun part about being an engineer, right?
Yeah, and it's sometimes you're behind the scenes a lot.
Hmm.
Um, there's that movie Sully, which is a good movie when he had to land that disabled aircraft in the Hudson River and he saved everyone's lives. It's well done. I can tell you from an airline pilot's perspective that they did a good job on that part too. And he gets a lot of credit for that, and he certainly deserves it. But they don't give credit really to the engineers who designed that airplane.
Hmm.
There was a lot of work by those engineers to make sure that it was safe and survivable in a situation like that. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes work that engineers do that just make our lives better and safer.
Yeah. And like you were saying before, sometimes you get the opportunity to work on some super secret stuff that, it might be used to protect our country or improve the way that we do things. But yeah, I see it all the time with the engineers that I work with. Sometimes you're not going to be in the spotlight, and that's okay. You're still
Yeah.
providing something to the world that will make it better. Very cool. Well, I appreciate you talking about some of the engineering aspects of this, but the other thing I want to discuss here too is what brought you into education? You had all this great experience and got some hands-on. What led you to be an engineering professor?
Well, I mentioned before I taught at West Point. I was in the Air Force at the time, flying the tanker aircraft, and I had a friend I went through school with who also went into the Air Force, and he sent me a Christmas card from West Point, and I'm like, well, what are you doing at West Point? And he explained the position there and let me know there was another opening. So I applied for it and was accepted to go teach there. And so I'd had some experience teaching, and when the airlines started laying people off, I thought, that's something that I like, something that I think I'm good at, and so let's go back and try that career field. And I do like it. I like the fact that I get to know the students, get to find out about them. Everyone seems to have a really interesting story, an interesting background, and just like with you, I get to keep those connections years later and kind of see how people's careers progress.
Absolutely. I can imagine that would be a lot of fun. You see a lot of faces and get to know a lot of people, so definitely fun. All right, we'll wrap things up with a few quick fire questions of all the stuff that you get to teach in engineering. What would you say is your favorite if you had to pick a subject?
You know, I've taught fluid mechanics a lot, and I like it because it allows me to at least a little bit to bring in airplanes because I like aircraft and talk
Awesome.
about lift and drag and those kinds of things. So I do like the fluid mechanics.
And there's a hands-on lab to go with it. That was one of the ones that I think I enjoyed the most. Absolutely. Good choice.
Yep.
I see it looks like a guitar in the background. You talked a little bit about your interest in music. Obviously, that sounds like it's a hobby of yours. Do you have any other
Yeah,
hobbies you'd
yeah.
like to share?
Yeah, I grew up playing the piano and singing in the choir and stuff. And lately, I've kind of gotten into guitars. I've been fiddling around with a bass guitar. And my problem is I'm an engineer, so I spend too much of my time taking them apart, figuring out how they work, figuring out how to make them work better, putting in upgraded pieces and parts when I should spend more of my time playing. But it's pretty fun.
Yep. We're engineers. We like to tinker, and sometimes that
Mhm.
puts off the hobby a little bit. Definitely.
Exactly.
All right, we'll close it out with one last question here. For kids that are interested in STEM and engineering, science related topics, if you had to give them one piece of advice to keep that passion alive and well right now, what advice would you give them?
One of the things I would tell you is stay in your math classes. There's math in engineering. It's just an important tool we use to solve problems. I mean, there's math in business and medicine as well, but certainly in engineering. Um, I quite enjoyed math going through high school. Uh, you may not love it quite so much, but if you kind of see your way through it, then when you get to engineering, I'll show you how you can use it to solve problems, and it'll make a lot more sense and be a lot more fun. So I think staying in the math is a good one, and then just being excited about solving problems, making a difference in the world.
Yep. That's absolutely right on the math thing especially. I didn't realize how important it was until I got much further down the road. I wish I had realized to focus on that a bit more early on. But like you said, you don't have to love it, but you make it through, you put the tools to use, and that's really what's important there. So, excellent advice. Jason, I want to thank you again for sitting down with us today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I really appreciate you sharing with the community just some of your experiences and how to keep that love for science and engineering alive.
Thank you for the invitation. It's been fun.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Quest Bite. I'll give you a quick preview for tomorrow. Corinne is going to be back for another experiment with you guys. You're going to learn how to make your own rock candy and some of the science behind it. So it should be really fun. You get a nice sweet treat, your own experiment out of it at the end of it. So stay tuned for that one. Same time, same place tomorrow. Um, just remember, guys, hope you're having some fun with the show and keep that knowledge and quest alive for continuing your interest in science and engineering. Thanks a lot, and we'll catch you next time.